Good Saturday morning, Northstate First Alert Forecaster Preston Donion here in the studio, giving you a little Saturday morning update before our evening newscast. I want to kind of walk you through what we're seeing out there right now, as well as what we expect throughout the day today with that kind of unusual weather setup. So I'll take you right to the weather computer. We'll talk about some things and what we're seeing out there from the past maybe 24 hours and forward through the rest of the weekend. So without further ado, let's get you over to the computer and let's take you, well, if this will work, I apologize. Bear with me. All right. We'll get you over to the weather computer. We'll talk about that fire perimeter this morning. So you can see not a lot of change in that structure, and you'll notice that the growth might be subtle now at this point in the fire because we haven't seen those giant jumps in acreage. That's been a positive. I apologize. I'm having a little camera trouble this morning. There we go. Wanted to zoom in rather than zoom in on my own mug. But here's what we're seeing. Again, there's that same structure that you've seen. We zoom in on the south flank of the fire. You haven't seen any changes there. And one thing I want to point out is when we look at this in the system, this is the most updated map. So it's over 400,000 acres. And again, that fourth largest fire in California of all that cloud cover that's been out for the past 36 hours at this point, maybe 24 hours. But with that cloud cover, satellites can't really get in, dig through and see what's going on down at the surface level. So we're not getting that hotspot detection the same way that we would on a clear sky day. So right now, you can see that perimeter continuing to creep its way through Tehama County, but with that latest mapping, notice the one thing that's kind of the biggest goal for firefighters is to keep continued progress within 36 and within 32. Hold it in this wedge. And so far, so good on that. If we zoom in, you can see, again, there's some action. And look at the terrain that we're dealing with here, right? Fire crews are really dealing with one of the kind of most difficult situations because you see how dense and green this is, very lush. So there's lots of dense timber out there. You see how rugged the terrain is, and you see how limited the access is. You see that obviously you've got 36 to the north, 32 to the south, but there's not a lot of access roads through here. The land is very difficult, a lot of drainages, a lot of creeks, and so the fire's got its own home territory, right? The fire's got the home field advantage. And so that's been the difficult challenge for firefighters. And we've seen that perimeter kind of creeping its way further north and east here through this wedge. But one of the really important things is obviously we have seen that growth in there. We haven't seen a lot of changes in distances to communities. Obviously that closest kind of slug of the fire to mineral hasn't changed. It's been more of this action a little bit further to the south where that growth has been happening. And obviously protecting communities is one of the biggest goals for fire crews out there. And so, there's a lot of contingency lines and things like that out to protect communities that are kind of in that continued growth line. But they're going to make extra effort. They're going to prepare for the worst. And so places like Mineral are going to have those contingency lines in place. And we've seen those contingency efforts allow for a lot of good progress further north on the fire. Now, you don't see any hotspots here. That's because there aren't any. We haven't seen any major heat detections from satellites in several days now across this northern flank. That's why just this morning, you may have just gotten the notification, all mandatory evacuation orders in Shasta County have now been reduced. So there's no longer a mandatory evacuation order for anyone in Shasta County. So everyone in Shingletown is at least underneath a warning or better. Manton again. So we're seeing improvements out there for a lot of folks kind of on the northern periphery of the fire, and that's great news. I'm glad folks are getting a chance to go back home. If you're still under that evacuation warning, you got to remember that, hey, fire's dynamic. Today's going to be one of those maybe kind of challenging weather days, so you just got to be ready. Wouldn't unpack entirely, but I'm so glad folks are getting a chance to go home, and hopefully that's the more of the trend than the continued growth of the fire. So again, that north flank, very quiet for a few days now. Haven't posted updated distances to communities because we really haven't seen many of them change, if at all. Most places you have not seen the fire grow towards you, so that number that I posted recently is probably still accurate unless you live out in places like eastern Tehama County. So we talk about Mineral, Mill Creek, Chester, Lake Almanor. Maybe those numbers have changed a little bit out into Plumas County as well. But for the most part, we talk about the western flank. Some of those spots like Dairyville, the fire creeped really close. You talk about Foothill Road here that runs just a little bit further east of 99. Boy, that ran really close there. But we haven't seen this fire change. This perimeter has held steady. There haven't been hotspots detected for a few days. This has been a really good area and an amazing effort by firefighters to keep this kind of western creeping through the foothills under control. So we've seen that there. Again, Butte County side of things, for the most part, no new hotspots there. It's really about eastern Tehama County. That is that angle of attack that's really important for fire crews right now. When we talk about smoke, you may smell a little bit. I was just out of my car, grabbing my tripod to set up for this, and I smelled a little smoke in downtown Reading. But for the most part, the density of that smoke is a whole lot better. Part of that is that we've got that rain out there. couple places actually saw rain reach the surface, and that's really, really good news out there for fire crews. We can just get a little rain without the thunderstorm element. That's beautiful. And we definitely saw a little bit of that this morning. We'll talk more about the rain in just a little bit. But with that kind of cloud cover and that rain sitting on top of the fire, kind of tamped down that smoke output. But we could see that pick up a little bit this afternoon, and that's what the model's kind of highlighting. Hey, places like Chester and far eastern Tehama County may be seeing that smoke back in a little bit more full force. So worth watching. Again, that air quality probably not going to be quite good in a lot of places that have suffered from the bad air quality in recent days. You're not out of the woods yet, but today may be a little bit better. You might see those go back down from that hazardous to unhealthy category in places like eastern Shasta County, northern Plumas County. There's that potential there. So we move through into Sunday. Again, that smoke looks like it's improving. We might see it pick up in the afternoon as the fire activity picks up, as it tends to do in the afternoon of every day. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go crazy, but it typically picks up a little bit after, say, 11, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, gets those afternoon winds and has a better chance to breathe a little bit. So that's the story with smoke. When we talk about fire weather outlook, those elements out there today, the heat, well, it's going to be a pretty standard day in terms of temperatures. And you know, the way this morning has trended so far, I wouldn't be surprised if we come in a little bit below normal in terms of temperatures. So you're kind of on that low to moderate side of things when it comes to the heat element out there. Obviously, still difficult conditions for firefighters just to be out in 100-degree weather, don't get me wrong. But it's not exactly a huge heat day, and that's going to help a little bit in terms of fire behavior. With the wind, kind of a moderate factor. We're not seeing super gusty winds out there, but with thunderstorms potentially producing gusty outflow winds, those winds that come out of the thunderstorm as that precipitation comes down, that is a little bit of a concern. So so that's why we kind of put things into moderate. The overall wind flow, not a huge problem for us, but the potential for thunderstorm related winds does elevate that, and we kind of average it out to maybe a moderate wind element. Dry air, not as dry as we've been, right? If you step outside, it kind of feels like Florida out there. Definitely did last night and a little bit this morning. We've got higher humidity than we typically see in the summer, and that helps a little bit tamp down fire activity. The wetter that air, the less the fire has a chance to really run and spread quickly. So that's good. But the thunderstorm element, we saw some of that yesterday, not really in our area. It really was a pretty quiet day, and that was a huge win for us from Mother Nature. She played nice. Today, maybe not so much. So we still want to be ready for that potential out there. And let's talk about that. We'll take you now to kind of the weather aspects of today. If my computer will play nice, we'll kind of run through what we're expecting. And there goes Siri going off on my phone. But we're watching for, again, those showers rolling through the region this morning. That's great. If we can get this without the lightning, as it looks like it has been this morning, right? You don't really have that instability in those morning hours, just a couple showers. That monsoonal moisture is a huge double thumbs up for us if we can get it like this. It won't stay this way throughout the course of the day. It's that morning chance at showers, and we love that, right? Because we've got our highest relative humidity in the morning, so better chance for any of that rain that falls to actually reach the ground. I was tagged in a post on Facebook last night saying, hey, we got a couple raindrops in Enterprise, and you may have seen actually a few drops out there. It didn't last long. It didn't feel like that summer busting rain event. We've probably got to wait another month or two before we get something like that. But a couple sprinkles, if these are actually hitting the ground, that's great news. And when it comes to hitting the ground, we look at our rain accumulation. Well, maybe we were going to look at our rain accumulation. Bear with me for just a moment. I apologize. Weather computer's on the fritz this morning, but we're just walking through how things stand today. So back to what we were seeing. Again, that rain out there this morning, a lot of places, at least on radar, showing up as having some sprinkles, having some showers. Is that happening? Well, we look at our 24-hour rain totals. Yes, there's a lot of places where that rain has reached the surface, at least according to kind of radar estimates. And it's not much. You probably have on the high end, maybe 0.05 of an inch. But we will take anything we can get. And notice all of that green there in eastern Tehama County, where the fire's most active. If we're putting rain on top of the fire, that's great. And I think we did get at least a few sprinkles out there. So with that happening, that's not going to put an end to this. This fire is an absolute monster. We have seen that. We know that. A lot of folks have felt that directly. So this isn't going to be the end of the park fire, but it is going to help slow down activity today, or at least kind of slow down that start point or where it picks up this afternoon. So that's a good thing. It's not the end, but it's a positive little element that kind of helps turn things in firefighters' favor. But we're not, of course, going to expect that throughout the entire day because I mentioned we don't have the instability in the morning, so it's just going to be that beneficial rain. And we'll take that rain right now, but notice later on in the afternoon that air is a little bit drier out there. Not necessarily critically dry, but it's still fairly dry. And that translates into high fire danger, right? Things aren't going to be necessarily sopping wet and not ready to ignite. So we are concerned about red flag conditions in a few spots out there and then thunderstorm conditions across a broader area than just that red flag warning. So Into tomorrow, we clear out all this monsoonal moisture. We're back to that critically dry air. That'll be the story for your Sunday. But right now, let's focus on Saturday. Again, we've got that dry air out there, not super dry, but dry, and that thunderstorm concern, and that combines for a red flag warning there for much of Siskiyou and Modoc counties. That's in effect from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. today. So those are the areas of concern for new ignitions and potentially rapid spread if a fire does start there. And that's related to two different things. First of all, it's the lightning potential. Even though we may be seeing some rain showers out there, I haven't seen much indication that places like Siskiyou and Modoc counties have seen showers. What we're watching for with that is lightning. Even though we've maybe got a little sprinkle, fuels are still really dry. You talk about those dense fuels. Think about what you would see out there in western Siskiyou County, right? Those are beautiful, dense evergreen forests. Those fuels are considered 1,000 or 10,000 hour, I think it's 1,000 hour fuels. It takes 1,000 hours for them to kind of respond to changes in moisture. So if we got rain for 1 hour, even if it's a nice, good drizzle out there, that's not going to change that kind of fuel, something that large. They are going to take a longer time to respond to environmental conditions. And so you think about the majority of those last 1,000 hours, things are still dry. So a lot of our fuels are still going to be dry, even if they get a little rain today. And I don't say that to be a negative Nelly. I'm just trying to kind of put it in context that things are still dry out there. And that's why they're elevating that red flag warning today. Because if we get lightning on dry fuels, that's never good news. Even if it's not dry lightning necessarily, things can still be primed to ignite if there's just not enough rain out there. And unfortunately, even though we're getting a little bit, it's probably not going to be enough to prevent, ignition, at least, or decent ignition chances for anything struck by lightning today. And then with those thunderstorms that roll through the region, you also get those gusty outflow winds. So think about when you have a thunderstorm, right? I'll kind of flip the camera. We'll kind of explain this visually if I can. If you've got a thunderstorm, it's bringing heavy precipitation down to the surface, right? So you have that downward motion coming from the center of the thunderstorm where all that heavy precipitation is. Maybe it's not actually hitting you on the ground with heavy force, but you got a lot of precipitation coming down, and even if it's evaporating, it's pushing down through the environment. So it pushes down, it hits the ground, and it's got to spread out, right? Because the ground isn't going to move, so that wind's got to move. It's going to go ahead and span out, and that's going to be the concern there. There's a little bit of boom, spreading out. That's that outflow wind. So if you see the National Weather Service or anybody else talk about outflow winds, that's that, where it comes out of the thunderstorm, out and out in erratic different directions, because again, it's hitting the ground and just spreading out. So if we have a new ignition in places like Siskiyou and Modoc County where that red flag warning is in effect, then we're going to be concerned about the potential for that to kind of elevate that fire danger out there. So that's kind of the explanation for why we've got a red flag warning in effect in a few spots today. Taking you out of that thunderstorm outlook, where we have that potential for thunderstorms. You see the focus is on the northeast corner of the state. Some of that creeping down towards places like Redding, maybe Red Bluff on the cusp. And of course, you see eastern Tehama County where we're concerned about the Park Fire. I would say if I were to kind of touch up this perimeter and where we might see that chance, I would probably bring the valley out of it a little bit and continue to say, yes, we see those chances in the higher elevations of Butte, Tehama, Shasta counties, Trinity County, and of course, all three of our kind of northern and eastern border counties there. So what does that look like? Well, we'll walk through that in a bit. Your thunderstorm outlook for your Sunday, a little bit quieter. And I don't really even see thunderstorm chances developing to any significant extent tomorrow. So that's a positive. But let's get back to how this plays out in terms of dry lightning. From the Storm Prediction Center, they're highlighting their fire weather outlook. Notice that when we talked about this yesterday, if you watched Daybreak with me, we had a bigger kind of L shape for that potential for dry lightning. They're not as sold on that anymore. That's a positive development, right? Doesn't mean this is the only place where we could see it, but they're trending away from that. They think, okay, thunderstorms that do develop today probably will be a little bit wetter. We have just enough moisture that this won't be as big of a threat for dry lightning, but we still see portions of Northern California underneath that dry lightning potential. So we want to make sure that we're just being careful, watching, and if you see smoke, make sure you report it so that we can get a handle on things quickly, because Mother Nature doesn't want to play nice with us, but that's the way she goes. We got to roll with it. Tomorrow, that fire weather outlook, nothing highlighted from the Storm Prediction Center for us. Even if they do say, hey, maybe some thunderstorms, they're not calling for any fire weather related to those thunderstorms. So that's a positive into tomorrow. But let's talk about how this plays out in kind of simulated radar and just look at what we're seeing out there. Pretty good cloud cover over the region this morning. That checks out. And a couple showers. I think it's underdoing those showers a little bit, because if you go and look at radar right now, yeah, it's raining more than it looks. So that's probably why things have trended wetter with any thunderstorms that do develop. We move throughout the day. You start to see more of those showers pick up. I'm more concerned about the afternoon. If we can scour out some of that cloud cover that's out there this morning, like it looks like it wants to, that's when you start to see some of those more prolific thunderstorms develop. You see this big old red bullseye here over Lassen County. That's not necessarily where that's going to happen, but the model's picking up on, hey, we've got the right conditions. I'm going to fire one up here. Might not be the exact location, but obviously that's going to be the general area. The further north and east you go, the better chance you have of probably seeing some of that thunderstorm development later on this afternoon. And if you start to see some peaks of blue sky, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods. In fact, that's probably exactly what Mother Nature wants to pop up these thunderstorms, right? Because thunderstorms thrive off of uneven heating of the surface. So if you have pockets of blue skies in there heating the ground, it'll pop up those air parcels, turn them into some kind of bubbly clouds and potentially thunderstorms. So here's this afternoon. I would be concerned if we saw something like this develop where you get a pretty good thunderstorm cell going because of those outflow winds, right? This isn't necessarily right here over eastern Tehama County where we're concerned about the fire, but no matter where this sets up, if it's in this just kind of general area, that could lead to kind of, erratic fire behavior. Not necessarily extreme, but erratic fire behavior if we have a thunderstorm in the general vicinity, creating those kind of outflow winds and just getting out of the normal circulation that we're watching for today. And again, that normal circulation is still going to be those south winds rolling through the region, but if you get a thunderstorm like this, that kind of shakes the whole game up and it can create its own winds. So we're watching closely for that. We roll through the evening, again, still seeing those thunderstorms, mostly on the Nevada side of things, but we could still see some showers out there in Lassen, Modoc counties. And again, into tomorrow, a whole lot quieter out there. You don't see as much development, and that's why I'm not really sold on any thunderstorms happening on Sunday. A couple little spotty showers, maybe here and there, but for the most part, I would say today is that bigger thunderstorm threat, bigger than yesterday, and yesterday was a dud. Didn't really happen. That cloud cover sat right on top of everybody throughout the majority of the day, and it didn't translate into any real prime development situations for any thunder cells. So if we can hold on to what we're seeing out there this morning, then maybe that's how today plays out as well. But there is that concern that into the afternoon, if we get some clearing, that may lead to some thunderstorm development. It might sound counterintuitive, but that's kind of what we're watching for closely there. And of course, into Monday, again, another day where we're back to our more typical summer pattern. Pretty dry out there, pretty clear, sunny, warm, and really kind of outright hot at that point. As we move into early next week, we're back a couple degrees above normal. And so that is going to be something that we watch closely. We can look at a different model just to kind of highlight the HRRR. This is one that does do a little bit more prolific precipitation, and note that maybe this is not picking up on the potential for that rain to evaporate before it hits the surface. Like here at 10 o'clock, it's showing that rain right over places like the city of Shasta Lake, Redding, Anderson, Cottonwood. I'm not seeing that. You might see a sprinkle, but I'm not expecting prolific rain. And so with this one, you have to take those precipitation estimates with maybe a little bit of a grain of salt, right? Maybe not going to translate into actual significant rain. But I like the way that it's portraying that potential over the higher elevations to continue to see showers. So maybe we do kind of trust a little bit of the way that this is playing out through noon. Let's watch the rest of the afternoon, see how it goes. You see a pretty good cell there firing up, and I believe that's Nevada County, right along Highway 50 or 80, I apologize, but a little further south. And then you see a couple more cells get rolling across the eastern reaches of the Northstate as the day goes on, continuing north. Any snow in the forecast? Jesus, I wish. I really do. But right now, we're sitting hot and mostly dry. After today, again, you move into Sunday. Models in pretty good agreement saying that, yeah, tomorrow's back to that pretty typical summer pattern. You may see a couple little clouds pop up there in Modoc and Lassen counties and drift their way off into Nevada with a little bit of rain there. But I am feeling a lot better about tomorrow's thunderstorm outlook than today. Today's just going to be one of those days where we got to watch out and be careful with that thunderstorm potential. But I'll take you one last time before we kind of wrap this up quickly to our fire perimeter, highlight what we're seeing out there. Again, we don't have new hotspots because of all that cloud cover that's out there this morning. We haven't had satellites be able to pierce through the clouds and see those hot spots. So that's one thing that's kind of a little bit of a bummer in terms of our knowledge of the fire, but also we will take that cloud cover. It keeps that relative humidity a little bit higher, keeps a lid on the fire a little bit, at least early this morning, and any little benefit that our fire crews can get, we will take that. But I'll take you to Butte County first. Again, you're not seeing any new hotspots out here, and that's not just because we don't have satellite detection. It's because we have not seen really significant activity in this reach of the fire. That's not to mean there's not little tiny hotspots here and there, smoldering vegetation, as folks have gone home to places like Forest Ranch, Cohasset. Yes, you are still seeing maybe some smoldering, smoking vegetation out there, but big hotspots, big activity on the fire. It's been quiet throughout the majority of the work week and here into the weekend, so that is good news. We shift you a little further north. This is where those hotspots would be if we were picking them up from satellite. In this wedge between Highway 32 and Highway 36 in Tehama County. We've seen some growth kind of in this area of the fire. This has been that area of concern a little bit, this kind of south portion of this eastern flank, right? So continuing northeast, but a little bit further south, some of this towards Onion Butte, that's where we've seen a little growth in that newest mapping. But you'll get those mapping updates if you get our notifications from the KRCR app, and you'll see that, hey, that acreage doesn't change as significantly in recent days. And yesterday, despite that potential for significant dangerous weather, it played out a little bit more favorably than we had expected, and that's why you didn't see a ton of growth. But you see some new spot fires kind of jumping out from the main perimeter, and that's why this area is still that main focus of attack. And the big goal for firefighters, again, keeping things contained between 36, 32, protect communities like Mineral, Mill Creek, and of course further along the line, Chester. This is an area that hasn't burned for a long time, right? This wedge here between 32 and 36, this is dense old growth forest. And so it's going to burn hot. And that's why it's a really dangerous area. And that's why it's hard for fire crews to get a handle in there, because it's dense vegetation. It's very inaccessible, very rugged terrain. All those things are working against them, but they've done a fantastic job of holding these two critical lines in this further progression. Obviously, we saw that really extreme fire behavior last Friday. So going back now 8 days, that's when the fire crossed Highway 36 near Paynes Creek. But things haven't really changed here. They've kind of put an end to this little creeping arm along 36 a little bit further towards Mineral. So we haven't seen growth on that in a few days. It's really been this area, running in kind of open wilderness, that we've seen changes in the fire perimeter, but nothing too terribly dramatic in terms of daily growth out there. The fire this morning, as I talked to you, 400,000 acres, just over 400,000 acres with 27% containment. So that's where things stand as the day gets going today. 27% containment, that's an improvement. That acreage only going up a couple thousand acres since yesterday. So we are seeing amazing efforts by firefighters, and it's definitely showing in those numbers. Take you to the north flank of the fire. I know a lot of folks have been asking, hey, where's the updated distances to communities? The reason why that hasn't happened is in the first part is because there hasn't really been a change in most places. Notice this fire perimeter. If you've been watching Daybreak, if you've been looking at posts and things like that, this has not changed in a few days. We saw a couple moments where things got active here, but that was early this week, and since maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, we haven't seen any hotspot detection on this north flank of the fire. What's burned is being highlighted by that perimeter, but there really hasn't been a lot of change, and that's a huge positive, is that we're seeing things a lot quieter on that north flank of the fire. That's why this morning, Shasta County Sheriff's Office announced there are no longer any mandatory evacuation orders in Shasta County. So, of course, Tehama County, I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head where things stand there, but I can tell you that folks in Shingletown, Shasta County side of Manton, you continue further towards Millville, none of those spots that were at one point underneath an evacuation order they're not under an evacuation order anymore. There may still be warnings out there. I definitely expect that to be the case, because we can't necessarily know exactly how the fires are going to behave, especially on a kind of dynamic day like today. But the quiet nature of this north flank and the efforts by fire crews to put in really strong contingency lines. They were saying, hey, our goal, this was on Wednesday or Thursday of this week. We were listening to their morning briefing. They said, we want to make sure that our contingency lines in Shasta County are bulletproof. And I think that's where they're at. I think they really believe in what they've done. And I believe in what they've done, because when we get to that point that they reduce those down to evacuation warnings, that's a really good sign that, hey, you can head home. Don't let your guard down yet, but you can feel a lot better that, hey, they've got pretty good confidence in the way that things are behaving on this north flank. And then just shifting you out to that western flank of the fire, not a lot to talk about here. That's why we haven't updated those distances either, is just because we haven't really seen any changes in any of this action closer to our communities along 99, along I-5. So that distance to places from Redding through Palisadro, all the way to Anderson, Cottonwood, Red Bluff, Tehama, Las Molinas, Gerber, all those spots. Dairyville was one spot that was real close, because if you follow Foothill Road here, kind of through that ag land out towards the very edge of the foothills, that distance was short for a while. But they shut that down, right? Those contingency lines to protect communities in the valley floor, those are holding up, and we haven't seen this fire activity really do anything for the past couple days. So that's a big positive. So that's where we stand this morning. Again, it's going to be a day where we're watching the weather to see if it plays out like it is this morning, or if the afternoon turns things back a little bit sour. But right now, we're looking at the fourth largest fire in the history of the state of California, over 400,000 acres now, but 27% containment this morning. So there's some positives. We've seen some changes. We've seen some quiet days out there. Today, not necessarily a quiet day, right? If you watch this back, if you missed the beginning of it, I kind of highlight that thunderstorm potential that's on the way for today. So just watch out for that. Remember, if you see smoke, no matter where you are, doesn't matter if you're close to the park fire, if you see that smoke, make sure you report it, because even if somebody else already reported it, that can't hurt. We want to make sure that we're on top of anything that pops up out there with that potential for lightning igniting some fuels. Even if we're seeing rain out there, that lightning still has the potential to ignite things, especially like trees that dry out and take a long time to respond. So thank you to everybody who hopped on this morning. I appreciate all of you. I hope you all can stay safe. I'm really happy to hear that folks are getting a chance to go back home in Butte, in portions of Tehama, Shasta counties. We're hopeful that that continues. So we're watching that closely. But in the meantime, stay safe out there. I hope you can enjoy your weekend. And remember, even if you're not in that fire perimeter and you're seeing thunderstorms, when that thunder roars, head indoors. We will have more for you throughout the day. We've got our evening newscast tonight that'll give you more of an update on where things stand. Thanks so much.